Hello everybody, welcome back to my Daily Dose with Tim. Today is Season 2, Episode 18. And so, as you know, this is part 5 of the bird topic that we have been on now, which means this is the 5th day in a row that we're staying on one topic. And I think the last time I did this was when we were doing lease options in Season 1 as well, which, by the way, is going to come back in a couple of weeks too, once we get onto that side of the income bucket. Remember, an income bucket is one of the buckets in the circle of wealth. Okay, so I'll get into that in a little bit too, just because I've got a few questions ever since we got onto the BRRRR subject. And so I want to make sure that all the questions are actually addressed, because as you guys know, investors' favorite answers a lot of the times is it depends. And as you can probably see, really it does depend, because ever since we started on this, especially when we were looking at some of the examples that I have done just recently actually, you'll notice that the reason why I'm going through the best case scenario, worst case scenario is also the fact that, well, you just don't know exactly how things are going to go. And this is why a lot of the people, especially when they're uneducated and they are actually watching the TV shows and they just think that, hey, you know what? Real estate investing is really easy. All I got to do is either just go and flip a couple of houses and make some money, or I can just go and line up and get myself a pre-construction property, depending on where you are. That's not exactly how we go, as you can probably tell by this point. So hopefully that whole it depends concept makes sense now to you. Yesterday, though, it's so cute. So many of you guys send me messages and just go, ooh, yesterday's session was a little doom and gloom. And I already warned you it was going to be, because it was really based on giving you a taste in terms of what the worst case scenario would have looked like. And, well, let's come back here very quickly, okay? This is what the worst case scenario would have looked like based on the example that we've been working on over the last 3 days now. And basically, what it really meant is that the appraised value at the very end does not come in at the level that we expect it to be, or it comes in at the very, very low end. And this is why it is never, ever wise to chase the market. And funny enough, today I actually had a conversation with a fellow strategy coach as well. And he was asking me about sort of my input and my opinions about the various markets right now across Canada. And at the end of the day, you know what? I always say, I think you've heard this as well, I don't speculate, because that's not what we do, right? We're teaching people, and we actually do this ourselves. What we're really doing is taking calculated risk before every single deal opportunity before we jump into it. However, again, opinions are like armpits. We all got them, and most of them stink. And there's obviously a whole other version of it, if you've heard of that as well. The point is, I still do have my opinions about it, which is, for example, in our home market right now, a lot of you guys know that Edmonton, Alberta as a whole, really relies heavily on the oil and gas industry. So ever since the decline of that industry, starting in 2014, really it didn't hit us until about 2016 really hard. So over the last 4 years now, our economy has suffered. However, it has slowly come back, and then COVID happened. And so COVID actually impacts pretty much almost every single market. We understand that there's been some anomalies and different activity level going on. Honestly though, Edmonton actually saw that too in the last few months. And a lot of our realtors just mentioned that, hey, we really do think that is a pent-up demand, just because during our regular spring season rush, it didn't happen because of COVID. We were on lockdown mode. And so that's why, and during this time, a lot of people began working from home, and they were stuck in spaces with their closed ones, the loved ones, for a little too long, and they realized they just need a little bit more space. Whatever the case may be, my whole point when it comes to investing is the fact that I actually quite enjoy this market more than I thought. Because in the last little bit, we don't keep count anymore, to be really honest, in terms of how many properties we're actually picking up, simply because of the fact that at one point we stopped tracking because we're treating it like a business at this point, okay? So I'll explain what that means in a little bit too. The point is, a lot of it, so much of the BRRRR process, so much of the value adding process depends heavily on the after repair value. And after repair value, if you remember, we started talking about this last week already when we were going into the flip topic. And so what that really means is we're actually looking for sold comps. So sold comparables to really determine what the end value is likely going to be. And when you're in a market that's kind of moving sideways for a while, the ARVs are actually fairly predictable, and that actually creates a lot of safety for our investments. And this is something that most people don't understand, because for those people that like to speculate, that think that they're holding a crystal ball where they buy real estate, they just wait and hold and pray that the market always goes up, those are the ones that will see this market and go, ooh, I don't know if I want to go into that market. However, for us, it has been so much fun, even just in the last 18 months for us as well. And so this is also one of the reasons why we've been a little bit more active in our home markets as well, having invested overseas in other provinces, other cities, other states ourselves, and coming back here. That is really what is really attractive right now, especially if you want to BRRRR, because it is not too difficult to really hone in on that range in terms of what your ARV can be, and you can actually really dictate if you want your property to fall under the low end or the high end of that range, as long as you work with your power team very closely, because you want to know what the final product is going to look like so that the appraisers can give you the valuations as closely to your analysis as possible. Again, do you have 100% control over that? I'm going to say one more time, no, you don't. However, it is a lot. There's a lot of control that you can actually have behind the scenes as well, okay? So going back to this little example here, remember the first thing that didn't go so well when we were doing the doom and gloom scenario was the fact that the after repair value was at a lower end. The other thing is the fact that when we're refinancing, we ended up not being able to get the cheapest money possible, which is usually the major banks and big lenders. So we ended up having to go into what we call B lenders, okay? Or subprime or equity-based lenders, depending on how you want to call it, where you're from. All these terms are applicable. We had to pay an upfront lending fee, and our rates are actually much, much higher, because these days in Canada, you can actually, if you're buying a principal residence, you can get as low as about 1.4, 1.5% over a 5-year term. If you're buying an income property over a 5-year term, you can actually have access to about 2.5 to 3%. We ended up getting nearly 5%. So it feels a bit of a ripoff. However, this was sort of the worst case scenario, as you know, okay? So we definitely worked in this case with our mortgage broker to make sure that we understand the range, okay? And at this point, after all is said and done, we have a cash flow of 180. Remember, this is based on self-management. Again, we're going to go into income properties in the next few weeks here as well, because I think this is going to lead into that very well. And I think you'll be very, very excited about the example that I'm presenting you with today. Because some of you guys are going, okay, well, we've been looking at $200,000, $300,000 properties, and that's great. However, where I live, it's not really available, because there are cities and different markets where an average single family home is ranging anywhere between $950,000 all the way to $1.4 million Canadian. And so that's totally fine. At the end of the day, remember, it's not about how much it's going to cost you. It's about how much it's going to make you. And if we're talking about the BRRRR process, let's go into this. So season 2, episode 18, we're going to do another quick performance audit. Just because the numbers are bigger, I wanted to validate earlier and write it down so that everybody can follow, okay? So I keep drawing this little guy here simply because, again, we're leveraging real estate as our vehicle. So same idea, money in, okay? Money in, the amount of money that we had to come up with, first of all, to buy the property. So P dot, not PP, okay? But our purchase price is $400,000. $400,000. completely abandoned structure. However, good bones. So what that really means is what we had to do is do a regut. And I want to tell you all right now, this is not your single family type of property. This is what we would call multi-unit residential. Okay, multi-unit residential. So yes, you will have individual units to be rented out. However, it's multi-unit. Some of you guys know this as multifamily, however you want to call this. So to be very, very clear though, all this really means is that there is not a mix of commercial and residential. Okay, those are the hybrid ones. That's not what this property is. At the end of the day, what this one is an 18-unit building. Okay. So complete regut, we bought it at $400,000. We had to spend $730,000 on the renovations, on the restructuring, putting up walls, redividing, going through permits, getting licenses to operate this and rezone it and re-permit it, all that kind of stuff. So had to go through a lot of things. And then what's going to happen is that when we were actually doing the refi, there will be fees as well. And right now we're not exactly talking about auditing the performance. I just want to do a BRRRR audit, okay? BRRRR performance audit, just to show you that it doesn't matter how much the property is worth. The idea, the point behind all of this is look at the numbers. And so if you add these two up, total amount of money in is actually 1,130,000. So $1.13 million. And at the end of all of this, we actually obtained an ARV of 1.6. The funny thing though is when we were purchasing this property, we were given an ARV estimate of roughly 1.4 to about 1.5 mil. So this actually came back a little better as well. And now I want to quickly just throw it out there, even though once again, we're not showing you income property calculations just yet this season. I did do a couple of episodes back in season 1. So if you want to go back to those first, however, like I said, it's going to come up in the next few weeks here as well. So the idea behind all this is that this amount was actually obtained based on what we call the brick and mortar value. The brick and mortar value. However, when it comes to larger multi-unit residential type of properties, a lot of the times the lenders actually will appraise it based on performance. So some of you guys, if you've been in this industry for a while or you've been collecting properties along the way, you probably understand what I'm saying. If not, don't worry, okay? That's not the part we want to focus on. What we want to focus on now is the after repair value on this one came out to be 1.6 million. And this was actually brick and mortar as well, not based on performance yet, okay? So 1.6. And what we ended up getting was 75% loan to value. 75% loan to value. That means the amount of money that we were able to refi and draw out is this much. So some of you guys are now looking at this and going, ooh, that is sweet. Because by the time we refi, we actually have $70,000 in our pocket. I actually did it this way for a reason. Like I said, we're going to go into multifamily calculations pretty soon. I want to let you know that we did not actually pocket $70,000 in this case in particular, just because there are actually other fees involved for us to get the to dip into the refinancing structure. However, the good news though is that we pretty much left very, very little. Very, very little. I will share that with you when we're going over the income properties. I will use this particular deal as an example one more time. We actually only left a few $1,000s, 4 digits into the deal. And this is a building that is worth 1.6 million. And the premise of that obviously is it still checks off the 2 boxes. The first one is the fact that it still cash flows. And the second one is the fact that, yes, there is a bit of a cash on cash return because we leave so very little in the deal. Okay, so once again, for some of you guys who are asking, oh my God, okay, so really, this is why I keep saying the BRRRR process is a process. It ain't a strategy, okay? It's not a strategy. Mobile home parks is a strategy. Lease options is a strategy. Wholesale is a strategy. Private lending is a strategy. Multi-unit income property is a strategy. Commercial unit like strip malls and warehouses and storage units, those are strategies because they're different types of properties that you have to master, and there are different rules and regulations that pertain to those types of property. So those are strategies. However, the BRRRR process is the oldest process in all of this for us investors. Now, what I really want to get into with you all is to BRRRR or not to, okay? This is something that we actually started with in part 1 with BRRRR as well. So number 1, I would still say regardless, the answer is always yes. Why? Because if you actually follow the simple rule, the simple rule of making money in the buy always, you should be BRRRRing. Why? Because you should be able to pick up a property, discount it, being able to add value to it. That's where the forced appreciation comes in, because we do not wait for the natural market appreciation to help us make money. We want control, we want security, and that's the main reason why. So I'm going to say yes, always, okay? Because it is the process, regardless. And this is why you probably have heard people that invest in commercial properties, for example. They might not refinance right away. They might wait for 3 years, 4 years, 5 years. When you're learning about multi-unit residential, you'll see what I mean by that, because it does take time for you to improve the performance of that property, of that asset. Once the asset performance has been improved, you'll be able to attract a whole lot more lender that'll give you very favorable terms. So one of the investors that I know is Toronto-based Canadian, and he used to share his story about how when he did a refinance on one of his commercial properties, he was able to walk away with a check. Okay, so just to put things really into context right here. Here, if we didn't have a lot of fees, we would probably put $70,000 based on straight up math into our pocket, okay? The story that I'm telling you, he would show us a check of how he actually put $1.4 million into his pocket upon refinancing. Think about that, okay? He did not do it right away though, because it did take time to pull out that money. So always yes, because it's the oldest trick in the book and you definitely want to follow it, okay? Now the second one is yes. Why? Because we talked about this. This is how you can scale. When you can recycle the same pot of money over and over and over again, really, that is what can help you scale much faster as well. And number 3 is the fact that, well, this is really just a process. This is really just a process. And what that means is process does not discriminate. It doesn't matter how old you are, what type of properties you're going into, which market that you are in, as long as you stick to the basic rules. So go back to the last few episodes if you've missed the first few. Here is how you make money in the buy and how you actually build in the renovations and how you find out those numbers. We've covered all of that already, okay? So now to BRRRR or not to, always, always, always a yes. Now, the flip side of all of that, though, is, well, there are a lot of investors. Remember, at the end of the day, a lot of people compare this to a monopoly game, which 4 houses equals 1 hotel. 4 green houses, 1 red hotel. And so there are investors, trained investors, that have gone into this, and maybe they didn't pick up multi-unit residentials. They started out with single-family homes, and they're at the point where they want to take out their equity and go into larger types of properties and different strategies now. And what they're selling is what we would call a turnkey, already BRRRRed property. And so, for example, today I was speaking to one of the students at Trust Your Talent, and right here in this market, they have a property, fair market value at 410, I believe, and they're happy to let it go if it's a private sale for $400,000, for example. And once you actually buy it, up, down, suited, so for those of you out east, it would be called a duplex, up, down, suited, after all the numbers have been crunched in, so your PITI payments, so your mortgage payment, your property taxes, and your insurance payment, your maintenance, your vacancy, and your property management have all been factored in. And obviously, depending on your final qualification on buying a property in terms of what the mortgage rate is, how much you got to come up with, and what the interest rate ends up being, okay? You can still easily cash flow $400 to $500 on a monthly basis. So for some people, that's actually pretty decent, okay? So again, to BRRRR or not to BRRRR, it doesn't mean that you always have to do it yourself, because there are people out there that have already done that process for you and they're ready to let it go. And again, they understand that it's all about creating win-win situations. So that's another way of looking at it as well. And having invested across the country and almost across the world at this point, I can tell you some of the deals that we have done were exactly those types of deals. So yes, we do our best to pull out as money as we possibly can. However, everything we do is goal driven, okay? If your goal is to get to a certain number of passive income fast in a very tight timeline, you might want to think about combining properties that are already BRRRRed and still cash flowing and will contribute to your financial goals, and properties that you need to go through the BRRRR process yourself. So once again, there's no right or wrong answer. All it comes down to is make sure that you do talk to somebody who's done this before to help you map out your path, because once again, your path to financial freedom is not a one-size-fits-all thing, okay? And this is why thank you so much to those who have been supporting me, and you understand what I'm creating here for you. This is 100% financial education based education series, if you want to call it that, and I'm just leveraging real estate to show you the concept of it, okay? So thank you so much once again for joining me. I know I'm always going a little bit over what I plan to do, but I really appreciate you staying engaged, your likes, your trust, your messages, your encouragement, your feedback, and more importantly, your shares. I appreciate all of your support. So if you do think that there's somebody else that can actually benefit from the content and the knowledge that I have been sharing with you guys, make sure you share the videos with them. And with that said, have a great evening, everybody. I will see you back here tomorrow with a new subject, and live well, everyone.